Nobody expected what happened that day at the luxury car dealership. A man, dressed simply in jeans and a worn-out jacket, walked in with quiet confidence. He wasn't loud or demanding, he just wanted to check out a car. But the manager took one look at him and made a snap judgment. In front of everyone, he insulted the man, mocked him, and finally, threw him out, literally. The man hit the ground outside as onlookers gasped. But what happened next? No one could have predicted it. And when the truth was revealed, the manager's life changed forever. Hey there, before we dive back into the story, let us know where you're watching from. If you love stories like this one, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We've got another amazing story coming your way tomorrow. It was a crisp morning in Los Angeles, and Keanu Reeves had decided to take a stroll through the city. He had always been a simple man, preferring to blend in rather than stand out. That day, he was dressed in his usual casual outfit, faded jeans, an old leather jacket, and a baseball cap pulled low over his face. To anyone passing by, he looked like an ordinary guy, but Keanu had a purpose that morning. His old car had finally broken down for good, and he needed a replacement. Instead of sending an assistant or making a call, he wanted to walk into a dealership and pick a car himself. He had always preferred doing things the simple way. As he approached one of the most prestigious car dealerships in town, the showroom gleamed under the morning sun. The glass walls showcased the latest luxury cars, sleek, polished, and shining like jewels. Inside, men in sharp suits chatted with customers, their voices filled with the smooth charm of salesmanship. Keanu pushed open the door and stepped inside. The moment he did, he felt the atmosphere shift. The salesman, who had been eagerly greeting well-dressed customers, suddenly went silent. Their eyes flicked toward him, scanning his clothes, his scruffy beard, his worn-out boots. One of them, a young man with slicked back hair, stepped forward hesitantly. Can we help you?" Keanu gave a small nod. "Yeah, I was looking to buy a car. Just wanted to check out a few models." The salesman hesitated. He glanced toward the back, where a man in an expensive suit stood with his arms crossed, a man who looked like he was in charge. The manager, the salesman, seemed unsure of what to do. But before he could respond, the manager walked over, his polished shoes clicking against the marble floor. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and had the arrogant smirk of someone who believed he was better than everyone else. "Sir," the manager said, looking Keanu up and down. "This might not be the place you're looking for." Keanu raised an eyebrow. "Why's that?" The manager smirked. "Well, let's be honest. These cars are expensive. We cater to a certain clientele. Maybe try somewhere more affordable." A few nearby customers turned their heads, sensing the tension. Some of the salesmen looked uncomfortable, but none of them spoke up. Keanu stayed calm. He had faced judgment before. He had learned not to react to arrogance with anger. "I appreciate your concern," Keanu said politely. "But I just wanted to take a look." The manager chuckled, shaking his head. "Look, buddy, we don't have time for window shoppers. I've got real customers to attend to." Keanu nodded slowly. He had encountered people like this before, people who judged others based on appearances. But he still gave the manager a chance. "What if I'm serious about buying?" he asked. "Wouldn't that be your job, to help me?" The manager's expression darkened. He didn't like being questioned, especially by someone he had already dismissed. "Oh, I see what's going on," the manager said with a smirk. "You're one of those guys who comes in just to sit in a luxury car, take a few pictures, and pretend you can afford it." Keanu let out a slow breath. He had no interest in proving himself to this man. But just as he was about to turn and leave, the manager took it further. "You know what? the manager sneered. "I don't have time for this." And before anyone could react, he placed his hands on Keanu's chest and shoved him hard. Keanu stumbled backward, caught off guard. His foot slipped on the smooth marble floor, and before he could catch himself, he fell. His back hit the ground just outside the dealership doors. Gasps filled the showroom. A few customers stepped forward, but no one knew what to do. The manager brushed off his suit and smirked. "Stay out," he said coldly. "This place isn't for people like you." Keanu lay there for a moment, blinking up at the bright sky. He wasn't hurt, physically, at least. But something in his chest tightened. Not for himself, but for every person who had ever been treated like they were nothing just because of how they looked. Slowly, he got up. He dusted off his jacket, adjusted his cap, and gave the manager one last look. He didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He simply nodded and walked away. But the story didn't end there. A few hours later, the dealership received a call. The receptionist picked up, her voice cheerful. "Good afternoon. Thank you for calling, this is John Carter," the voice on the phone said. "I'd like to speak with the owner of the dealership." John Carter. The name sent a wave of tension through the room. Everyone knew who he was, the billionaire investor who owned several businesses, including high-end dealerships. The owner, a well-dressed man in his 50s, quickly came to the phone. "Mr. Carter. What an honor. How can I help you?" There was a pause. Then John Carter's voice came through, cold and sharp. "I just received a complaint. A serious one. From a friend of mine." The owner stiffened. "Sir, a friend who walked into your dealership today, was insulted, and was physically thrown out by your manager." The owner swallowed hard. "Sir, I have no idea." "You don't need to," Carter interrupted. "Because I already know everything. That man was Keanu Reeves. And he wasn't there to play games. He was ready to buy a car. But instead of treating him with respect, your manager assaulted him." The owner's face turned pale. The room went silent. The employees stared, realizing how badly they had messed up. "I don't tolerate this kind of behavior in any of my businesses," Carter continued. "So here's what's going to happen. First, your manager is fired. Immediately." The manager, who had been listening from across the room, felt his stomach drop. His face turned ghostly white. "Second," Carter went on, "I expect Keanu Reeves to receive a formal apology. And third, Mr. Reeves will be given the best treatment if he ever decides to step into one of my dealerships again." The owner scrambled to respond. "Sir, I completely understand. I'll take care of it right away." But it was too late. The damage had been done. By the next morning, the news had spread. Customers who had witnessed the incident shared their stories online. The dealership faced massive backlash. And the manager? He was out of a job, just as quickly as he had thrown Keanu out. As for Keanu, he never gloated. He never made a public statement. He simply continued living as he always did, with kindness, humility, and a quiet strength that spoke louder than any words. And when he finally did buy a new car, he made sure to purchase it from a dealership that treated everyone with respect, because in the end, it wasn't about revenge. It was about showing that true wealth isn't measured in money, but in character. The fallout from the incident didn't stop at the manager's termination. The dealership's reputation took a massive hit. Customers who had once admired its prestige and now questioned its ethics. People shared the story across social media, and news outlets picked it up. Everyone was shocked that a place known for serving the wealthy had treated someone so poorly, especially someone as kind-hearted as Keanu Reeves. But Keanu? He remained silent. He had never been the type to seek revenge or hold grudges. He continued with his daily life, unaffected by the scandal that was brewing. While the world was outraged on his behalf, he carried on with his usual humility. One afternoon, while sitting at a quiet cafe, Keanu received a call from John Carter himself. "Keanu," Carter's deep voice came through, "I can't tell you how sorry I am for what happened. I had no idea that one of my dealerships was being run by someone so arrogant." Keanu chuckled softly. "John, it's really not a big deal. I wasn't looking for special treatment." "That's exactly why it's a big deal," Carter sighed. "If they treated you like that, imagine how many other people have been turned away. People who weren't famous. People who actually needed help." Keanu went silent for a moment. Carter was right. How many hard-working, regular folks had been treated the same way, without anyone ever noticing? "Listen," Carter continued, "I'd like to make it up to you. I want to personally invite you to any of my dealerships. You can pick any car, any model, and it's yours, on the house." Keanu smiled to himself. He appreciated the gesture, but free things never interested him. "That's generous, John, but I don't need a free car. I just wanted to be treated like a normal customer." "I understand," Carter said. "But at least let me set up a private appointment for you at one of our locations, one where the staff actually knows how to treat people." Keanu thought for a moment before responding. "Actually, I have a better idea." A week later, the same dealership that had thrown Keanu out was under new management. Carter had made sure of it. The previous manager had been fired, and in his place was someone who believed in treating everyone with respect, but the biggest surprise came when Keanu himself walked through the doors again. This time, he wasn't alone. With him were a few families, single mothers, hard-working individuals, people who had dreamed of owning a reliable car but had never been able to afford one. Keanu had personally selected them after hearing their stories. The new manager, already aware of what had happened before, welcomed Keanu with open arms. This time, there were no judgments. No assumptions. Just genuine hospitality. Keanu walked through the showroom, looking at the cars, but he wasn't shopping for himself. Instead, he turned to the families he had brought with him. "Pick a car," he told them with a warm smile. "It's yours." The families were stunned. "What?" one woman gasped. We can't afford this." Keanu shook his head. "You don't have to." He had already worked out the details with Carter. The cars would be fully paid for, no loans, no debt, no hidden fees. Just a fresh start for people who needed it the most. Tears filled the eyes of the recipients as they realized what was happening. Mothers hugged their children, fathers wiped away tears, and people who had once only dreamed of owning a safe and reliable car suddenly found themselves with keys in their hands. The staff at the dealership stood in awe. They had once seen a man be thrown out simply because of how he looked. Now, that same man was changing lives, not out of revenge, but out of kindness. News of Keanu's generosity spread once again, but this time, it wasn't about humiliation or arrogance. It was about compassion. About using one's power and influence to lift others up instead of pushing them down. When asked by reporters why he had done it, Keanu simply shrugged. "Everyone deserves to be treated with dignity," he said. "It's not about money. It's about respect." And with that, he drove off, not in a luxury sports car, but in a simple, reliable vehicle. Because for him, it was never about proving anything to anyone. It was always about doing the right thing, and that was what truly shocked everyone. In the days that followed, the dealership's transformation became a national story. People were amazed, not just by Keanu's generosity, but by his humility. He hadn't used the incident to shame anyone or to elevate himself. Instead, he had turned a moment of cruelty into an opportunity to help others. the families he had gifted cars to couldn't stop expressing their gratitude. One woman, a single mother named Maria, shared her story in an interview. "I used to take 3 buses to get to work every morning," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I'd leave home before sunrise and get back after dark. My son barely saw me. And when Keanu handed me those car keys, he didn't just give me a vehicle, he gave me time. Time with my child. Time I never thought I'd get back." Her words resonated with thousands of people. Messages poured in from around the world, thanking Keanu for his kindness. But as always, he stayed out of the spotlight. He didn't make any statements. He didn't go on talk shows. He simply continued living his life as he always had, with quiet compassion. The dealership itself changed, too. Under new management, it became known for its customer service. No longer did the salesman judge customers based on their appearances. Instead, they treated everyone with the same respect, no matter what they looked like or where they came from. One afternoon, the new manager received a letter in the mail. It was from Keanu. It wasn't long or dramatic. Just a few simple lines: "Thank you for choosing kindness, the world needs more of it." The letter was framed and placed at the front of the dealership, a quiet reminder of what had happened and the lesson that had been learned. And what about the former manager? The one who had shoved Keanu out the door. At first, he had been furious about losing his job. He had called it unfair, a misunderstanding. But as he watched the story unfold, he began to reflect. He had spent years judging people based on their wealth, their clothes, their status. And where had that gotten him? One evening, he found himself sitting in a diner, scrolling through the endless comments praising Keanu's kindness. He saw the faces of the families who had received cars, their eyes filled with gratitude. For the first time, he felt something unfamiliar, regret that he had thrown out a man he assumed was worthless, only to realize he had pushed away someone who had more heart than anyone he had ever met. That night, he made a decision. He wasn't going to be that person anymore. He started small, holding the door open for strangers, smiling at people he once would have ignored. He applied for new jobs, this time making sure to treat interviewers with respect, no matter how they dressed. Months later, he landed a job at a different dealership, not as a manager, but as a regular salesman. At first, it stung. But he worked hard, and something amazing happened. He found himself enjoying his job in a way he never had before. He stopped seeing people as dollar signs and started seeing them as human beings. One afternoon, an older man walked in, wearing a simple sweater and faded jeans. A younger version of himself would have ignored the man, assuming he wasn't worth his time, but this time, he smiled and walked up to him. "Good afternoon, sir," he said kindly. "How can I help you today?" The man looked at him and smiled. "Just looking, thanks." The former manager nodded. "Take your time. Let me know if you need anything." He didn't push. He didn't assume. He simply treated the man with respect, and for the first time in his life, he understood what Keanu had known all along: kindness doesn't cost a thing. But it changes everything, and that was the lesson he would never forget.